You're listening to the Walled Garden Podcast. This podcast is a part of the Walled Garden online community, a community dedicated to sharing and discussing philosophy, beliefs, ideas, and creativity among all types of people, in order to gain new insight on some of life's biggest questions and make the most of how we live. We appreciate you joining us.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Walled Garden Podcast. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today, and I know you won't be disappointed. We have a really fascinating conversation for you today, one that we had in our last meetup for the Walled Garden, and the entire conversation was based around the social media strategy for the Walled Garden. I wanted to wrestle with this problem with the core contributors and also with our members. So we have a few of our members as well as Sharon, Kai, Jake, and myself. And we're really wrestling with, what should be our social media engagement? How are we going to use social media within and without of the Walled Garden to, communicate our message to the masses, but also to communicate and engage with our members. So a really interesting discussion today. We kind of jumped all over the place, but by the end, we came to a common a consensus on how we were going to use social media. And we all came at this from a place of principles and values and philosophy, trying to work out what's going to work best for us and also what is going to be the healthiest way to engage with these platforms. So I really think that you're going to enjoy this conversation today. And I will let you know that this week's meetup is still open to anybody who wants to attend, because what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be sitting down with Sharon LaBelle and having a conversation with her around my first book that many of you will know is now released, at least in pre-order. And so Sharon and I are going to discuss this because Sharon has really been with me along the whole process of writing The Poet and the Sage. And she's read it, a couple of times, and she's really gotten to know the book. And so she has some really interesting insights from her perspective, getting to know the book. And we're going to have that conversation. It's going to be really interesting. I can't wait to do that. So you're more than welcome to attend, and we would love to see you there. So in the show notes for this episode, I'm going to include the link for where you can register for that meetup coming up this Friday, USA time anyway, so you can see the time when you go to the registration link. But yeah, I'd love to see you there, and we will be having a discussion about the book, and I'll also be sharing the audio format of the first 3 chapters or poems in the book. So I hope to see you there, and I hope you enjoy this episode and get a lot out of it. And again, if you haven't yet joined up at the Walled Garden, I will let you know that for our first 100 members, you can use the promo code Practical Stoic, all one word, and that's going to get you over 20% off your membership for life. So we would love to have you on there. We're really building a beautiful little community here, and I'm so excited about what Sharon, Jake, and Kai and myself are building here. I really think it's a special project that we're putting together. So we'd love to see you there, and without any further ado, I hope you enjoy this episode conversation around the social media strategy for the Walled Garden. So today, I made one of those kind of last-minute decisions that I'm so famous for. I don't know how Jake and Kai and Sharon deal with this, but I'm just the kind of person that I'll just, this is what we're going to do. And then tomorrow it's a completely different direction. So we were actually planning on talking today about, what were we planning? Talking about our kind of schedule for next year, what we're looking to offer in our teaching sessions. But then I thought, for the past few months, I've just had this kind of, the way I described it to everybody before we jumped on this call, with this dead goose hanging over me. That dead goose is social media. What should be my strategy, even as a coach, how do I want to be interacting with social media? Because and with the Walled Garden at large, we're trying to think, what is the best strategy here? Because personally, I have a lot of hangups, and perhaps there are some philosophical considerations that I haven't, looked at yet. But I was just telling everybody before we jumped on, when I was working for the gym at Snap Fitness in Nambour here, as soon as I went into that role, I just became an absolute monster on social media. It was like every single day I was posting constantly, and but for the business, it was I really inhabited that space, and it was really good for the business. And I was just the funny thing is, if you really want to see something telling of who I am as a person, you go and search Snap Fitness Nambour on social media, probably on Instagram. And if you look at the videos that I was doing in like late 2019, what you'll see is like a very energetic gym manager doing funny videos, doing silly videos, like very high energy. But then after I quit my job, like I was still there until like January of 2020. And you start to see when it was during a time when I was starting to realize that I didn't want to be that person on social media. You start to see the soul leave the videos that I was doing. Like you start to see that it's no longer high energy, gym manner. It's more like, hey, come on in today if you want to see. Like you can literally see the soul leaving my expressions.
Yeah.
And it's very revealing. But my point being, then last year I kind of came in and I was just like, I felt like I needed to leave a lot of my social media. So I did. And there are still some fragments left over, like the Practical Stoic Mastermind group on Facebook, and a couple of other things. But the reason we're calling this today to talk about social media is because I really want to engage in a philosophical discussion with you guys around, how should we use social media both to communicate our message to, people who we think could be helped by it, but also, for communicating with our members, and engaging with people who we think would really benefit from these kinds of discussions. And so I don't want to be I don't want to be so full-fledged in my own way of thinking, which is, I'm actually kind of worried about what social media is doing to all of our minds. I'm worried about who it kind of turns humanity into. But then, I've been thinking this week, if I was speaking to Kai, which we can do today, Kai, I want to know the Stoic perspective, because it seems to me like social media is an indifferent, meaning it's going to be about how we use it and how we interact with people and the standards that we set, rather than whether we use it or not. But I am horrified that this new metaverse is going to be the waterfall that all of humanity flows over, and there's going to be a few left on the rocks up the top watching as they do so. But nonetheless, that's a discussion for another day. So I guess, Kai, I'm going to throw it over to you first, right? Because you are really, you're the master of social media as far as I'm concerned in this group. You really know how to communicate effectively on there and to get your message across, and you seem to know how to use it in a really healthy, productive way. So I want to know from you, what do you think about our social media strategy for the Walled Garden? How could we use it best?
I think I'm going to always use, because I quite like the idea of this title of this being called Stoicism and Social Media, because I think it actually would help a lot of people.
Yeah.
The first thing is, as a Stoic or somebody who's influenced by Stoicism, is what is my role? What is my role? Because depending on your role will depend on how you use it, how often you think you ought to use it, and how you would engage, and how often you engage with a specific kind of individual or group. Also, when you know what your role is to also ask yourself, what typically are my biases, right? So do I typically feel the need to speak to one particular group and not another group? Is that reasonable? Because it might be that, yes, for example, we might not want to speak to people too much who are really interested in, say, of the rules football, because you're like, well, I don't think that they're really interested in Stoicism. So trying to engage too heavily with those individuals may not be particularly wise. So that's the first thing. What's my role? What's my role right now when I engage, as part of the Walled Garden? What is the Walled Garden's role? How do we see that? And is it the best strategy? So again, you're looking at saying, okay, I could spend some time on social media, But is that the kind of people that we want to reach? Because, for example, in the UK, it's something like, again, it's almost like it's almost the Pareto principle that 20% of users make up 80% of the tweets. And it's only something like 20% of the UK population is even on Twitter, for the sake of argument. So are they the people that we want to reach? Do they want to be reached? Right? And so there's no direct, this is what, in terms of communication, not social media per se, who should one speak to and how should one speak to them? Because that is an ancient question, right? The whole thing about Socrates is to ask questions, to engage in that. So I do think it would be to highlight, to use business language, the cost benefit analysis, to say, okay, what are our strengths and what do we want our strengths to be? Because sometimes you don't have something as a strength, but you want that to be your strength. So I personally think, I don't particularly argue, as you know, Simon, I don't particularly use Twitter, for example, to argue. In fact, I try very hard not to do it. I just poke the occasional thing. So someone said on Twitter this week, Stoic advice, if you can't control it, you need to learn to not give a about it. And I'm like, well, I can't control people. Does that mean I shouldn't give a about them? And so we can use Twitter, because we have 160 characters, I think it is, maybe a bit more these days, to highlight where that reasoning and that logic has broken down. But we can't do it to engage sharply in a conversation. So again, it's a question of what kind of engagement, what do we want to have? And I think it would probably be an 80-20. So, you put 20% of your effort, say, in something like shorthand, like Twitter, and 80% in these meaningful conversations, because I'm hearing Scott, I'm hearing Tom, I just heard Brennan, and Sarah and other people that have come, Santara, for example, about why they're part of the walled garden community. And it's not because they love quotes from Seneca. So that's not where it's at. I know that's not a specific, concise sort of answer, but from a Stoic perspective, that is the kind of questions that one should ask themselves. Because I can't tell you how you should use it as a Stoic. That's not my role. My role is to say, are you being coherent? You're saying you want A, you're actually doing B, and then you're getting upset because you're not getting A. Well, this is why it's not happening. Are you okay with that? And so that's sort of, from a Stoic perspective, what one should sort of consider. In terms of also understanding that meaning is lost when you only have 160 characters. Meaning can also be lost in a 2-hour conversation. You can have people converse, but it's not necessarily the length. If we can make a point, like I think I tried to make this week, like, really, you're saying this is a Stoic advice, then yes, then that is sensible to do so. But for example, I don't tend to do those kind of sort of Sharon one-liners if somebody's talking about, let's say, an Israeli-Palestinian conflict, because that's not my expertise. I shy away from that because it's not something that I know a lot about. And so I might have a personal opinion, but I don't need to have a public opinion, because it's a very different thing. So again, it's sort of like asking yourself, what is my role? What do I need to say, if anything? And I would say in my case, and I'm not saying everybody's like this, because there are journalists who need to have a lot more opinions because of their role, I basically don't say anything about on 99% of subjects. I just really focus on what do the Stoics say, because I feel that's where my expertise lies. And I wish that more academics did that on social media. That's beyond my control. So it's wishful thinking.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate your opinion on this, Kai, because I mean, yeah, you're coming from very much the standpoint of, what is our individual responsibility or role, to play. You're also touching on, okay, what is your expertise and what is the particular thing that you can contribute to these communities? Well, you should probably, that should be the thing that you're trying to do. And I think that's something else that I've been thinking about is, last year my social media was very fragmented. I didn't quite know what I was doing with it. And, there's a little bit of this here, there's a little bit of that there. I was kind of thinking, well, I have to create things to put on here. At the moment, I've written enough. I've, got enough stuff that I can share with people that I think is meaningful, that it's no longer going to be about like, well, I need to create something to put in this platform. It's going to be more like picking things from the walled garden and saying, I think this goes really well in the Facebook group. I think people might appreciate it there. Or I think this might actually be something that that people on Twitter might appreciate, or that would be appreciate is the wrong word. It might help some people. I think I've been thinking, the walled garden, what is our ultimate aim here? Hopefully it is something like to be a transformative force for people in their lives, so that they are, moved to a better way of being that supports them and supports the people around them. So we're trying to leave really positive ripples in the world. Social media is potentially a way that if we can get it right, if we can get our strategy in terms of what we post or how we post, how we communicate with people right, then perhaps it can do more good than harm, which is why I'll throw this in. I've been really thinking about this metaphor of the walled garden, right? Because we are gardeners now. We're trying to caretake this garden that we've got. And last night I was sitting there and I kept on thinking, like, there's just been this, as I said, this dead goose hanging over me. And one of the dead geese was actually the Practical Stoic Mastermind on Facebook, this group that I set up. And I've done nothing with it, right? And it's just been sitting there gathering weeds in terms of, people just posting for promotional stuff. And, it's gotten a little bit, there's nothing really happening in there, right? So to me, when I think about that, I think, man, that's like a weedy garden. Like, I've got to go in there and pick out the weeds. So I did that last night. I went in there and I went gardening, and I, made it more beautiful. I changed the name to the Walled Garden Community. I did all these things to make sure that it is now a place that actually fits in with what we're doing here. And one of the things that I wrote in the kind of introduction to the group is, we love that you're here, but just always remember that the real action is happening outside of the screen. So although we love that you're here, please always have it in your mind that you can go too far in terms of your involvement with social media. So maybe get away. Like I also said, if you're at the dinner table, or if somebody is in need of your attention, or if something is in need of your attention and you find yourself in our group, we'd highly recommend that you get out of this group and go take care of what needs, so things like that, where I'm thinking, we need to set a standard for how we use social media and how we encourage those who engage with us on social media, perhaps even letting them know that this is something we're going to spend like 5 minutes a day on, right? But in terms of the Walled Garden community that we're setting up here, we want to be with these individuals here, communicating with them. So we're going to be spending a lot more time there, but we will nourish what we can. So I don't know. I'm going to throw Jake in now. What do you think? Like, what are some thoughts that are popping up for you so far?
Now you can hear me. There we go. I have a lot of thoughts on this subject, because social media is also something that I have struggled to have a good relationship with. And I think you summed it up really well when you mentioned, that in and of itself, as an idea, social media is a neutral, right? And the way that I like to think of it is a tool which can be used for any variety of purposes, right? And so I've had times in my life where I've said, oh, this is rotting my brain. I'm going to delete everything I have and just get out of it, right? And then I find that I drift back to it, because I'm like, oh, I remember I used to really like reading about such and such thing happening with such and such group. And so I think that, like, I've now come to the conclusion that I think it's important when there are new technologies that arise, like social media, especially one as powerful as social media, to not let the dangers of how it could be misused scare you away from using it for good, right? Because really, when you look at it, that it could be used as a tool for good or as a weapon, hopefully the end result, the outcome of this technology will be that there are enough people interested in using it as a tool for good that will win out over the people who want to weaponize it, right? And so I see, like, the walled garden, like you say, Simon, like, I like the idea of using social media as kind of a way to reach, getting metaphorical, to reach outside the walls, right? Or at least make the walls transparent to let people kind of have a glimpse into, like this concept that we've landed on from the discussions that we've had over the last month of what we want this to be, which is just a place to share insight and share wisdom and to agree and to disagree and debate and support and kind of just each seek out, virtue in our lives and in whatever way that means to us, but also not leaving the garden out into the wilderness to get into fights or debates with people on Twitter over things that are not meant to be debated on Twitter because it's just not the place or time. I like the idea of taking snippets of things that, like, insights from meetings that we have, meetups and conversations that we have, little snippets, and sharing those. And, that could lead to people wanting to get involved in the conversation in really great ways, right?
Yeah.
Maybe joining up, or maybe just following, or maybe sharing it with a friend, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm in agreement there. And it is something that I kind of feel as though although I am like, I find that I'm very, very happy just being away from social media. I'm very happy that it's not on my phone, and it does aid my psychological health, to not, and I think that built into these systems, I think there's an argument to be made that built into these systems is often that there's often features that do encourage it to be a force for bad more than it encourages it. So even the scroll, it's exactly like a slot machine, at a casino. Like, there's no when I jump on YouTube's kind of like my final frontier for apps on my phone that are social media. And I will just like keep on scrolling until something interesting pops up. Keep on scrolling until something interesting. And that's not healthy. It's not healthy. And this is built into so many of these systems. And so I've been really struggling with this idea that some of the smartest people that we have available to us as a civilization today are being hired for massive amounts of money by these social media companies to figure out how they can get us to stay on social media 10 seconds more, and that's horrifying.
Yeah.
So I think Jake has to get going. Okay.
Yes, I apologize. Thanks, everybody.
Love and care, Jake.
Bye.
Thanks so much for showing up anyway.
Bye, Jake.
So yeah, I guess my point being, I recognize that there is inbuilt unethical practices in these social media. So I think for me personally, that's why it would be so important that as we engage with these social medias, we do it in a way that we're really encouraging people first and foremost to, if they want to get involved in the conversation, get involved in as personal a way as possible, and is in a way that isn't just scrolling, looking for that next dopamine hit. So I don't know, social Sharon, social Sharon. Do you have anything that any promptings of the heart that you have for us in this situation?
I do. I'm acutely aware of the mechanics of the medium itself that are dangerous for us just because of our animal natures, right? But another lens through which I look at this is I think about the Buddhist idea of right speech, which has its counterpart in all wisdom traditions. And one of the guidelines that people within that tradition invoke whenever they're considering something that they're expressing is it true? Is it necessary? Is it useful? Is it kind? And I think those 4 questions, they're not the only questions to ask, are very good guidelines for posting anything. Now, mind you, that might not grab you the most eyeballs, but it at least assures us that whatever we're expressing to the world has integrity.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
Is
like
it,
that.
is it true, necessary, useful? Is it kind? Yeah.
Well, I almost think like that should be built into, say, if we decide to, really, rebuild this walled garden community on Facebook, for example, that should be one of the core rules. Is I think something that I actually put in there was what we're looking for here is for wisdom to prevail over folly, which means that we're not necessarily going to govern the speech in this group. We're not going to, pull people's posts down if they do something, if they say something that is not necessarily true or useful or, kind. But what we hope is that, that freedom of speech that's inbuilt into the platform is other people will say, I don't think that this is wise what you're saying, or I don't think I think
Right.
that this is actually, this is not helpful here, and we trust that the wisdom will prevail. But yeah, I think you're right, Sharon. Is in that there is so much inbuilt into these systems that can be harmful, but nonetheless, if we are careful with what we do and how we do it, it can be a force for good, and for truth and wisdom. Which,
and part of our mission, excuse me.
No.
Well, I was just going to say, but part of our mission, if we have our arrows pointed at virtue, is as a group, we're reimagining human discourse, because it's been, as we know, so degraded. And I know it's a commonplace to make that observation, but part of what we're doing is trying to relearn how to talk to one another in a helpful way, where we're not just having intellectual beauty contests or power games, because those poison so easily. I mean, they're the easiest thing in the world to leak into human exchange, and we want to do better.
Yeah. Although I will say that the power games begin in 2022. That's the next stage. So I'm not sure what you're thinking. This is Hunger Games on Zoom, really, what's happening here. So I don't know if Toma or Scott or Brennan, if any of you have any insights for, we'd love to hear it. Any thoughts that you have about social media or how we might best engage with it. Toma, I'll let you jump in, because I think,
Yeah, I don't know a lot about social media because I've kind of avoided it. And even my Facebook or Meta, whatever now, is kind of like really out of date, embarrassingly so, and my LinkedIn as well. These are all things I need to work on. But what's really interesting is before I came on today, I actually talked with somebody about TikTok. And I've been part of a presentation because I want to learn about this and use it in my business. And it was very interesting what she had said during the presentation. It was a 1 hour thing, and she's a coach. And the idea is that you hire her, right? But we had a half hour get to know each other call today. And she pointed out a few things about being open to getting criticized and how you could really get slammed. And if you're ready for that kind of thing, especially if you go viral. So that was a consideration. So I really like what you said, Sharon, but that can also be turned around and, backfire, right? So you have to be willing to accept that part of it too, which is very stoic as well, preparing for disaster. So I think that's one thing to be considerate of. And I like also, because I've done quite a few 12-step type meetings, the idea of attraction rather than promotion. So attracting the right people and having that kind of a mindset. I think you already do, Simon, so with the rest of the group, obviously, right? That we're not out trying to push something on anybody, but we really want to attract like-minded people to kind of join in the gardening. I like that analogy, actually, how that was expressed. So I like to do sculpture work. And she said, well, looking at your website and the work that you do, some people may not even consider that art, and you might get slammed for that. And I said, that's okay. If that's what they think, right? That's fine.
Yeah.
But that was just an eye opener for me. And I think that's probably the piece I can share.
Yeah.
Right
Yeah.
now. I'm willing to
fully with
learn
you.
more about this. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree, Tom. It's kind of like a gird your loins kind of situation, like, because and also I think, we need to be prepared. I love this idea of attracting versus promoting. I think that's something that we can all agree on here, is that, when we're engaging with social media, and this is why I said, one of the things that has happened in the Practical Stoic group is that, you just start to see that the same kind of people post over and over again, and they're not engaging. They're not, they're not actually trying to offer something of in a thoughtful way. They're just posting a link to their YouTube video that they did and saying, watch this, watch this, watch, it's promotion. And that sort of stuff, I think, is what we're going to try and avoid. We want, if people are going to be on here and if they're going to be talking with us, then let's make it meaningful and see if we can, and it's not as if I want to make it clear to everybody who's listening to this on the podcast. It's not as if we think that we're reinventing the wheel for how you should use social media. It's like, there's plenty of people out there doing exactly what we're talking about right now. I think what we're doing is wrestling with this on a personal level, and saying, I think I ran away hiding from social media. And I think that was good for the time. Now it's time to come back and say, how do we use this appropriately? So, Brennan and so I think Scott mentioned that he's in a doctor's office. So, he might have to head off soon. But Brennan, if you had something that you wanted to add, I'm not sure you've taken your mic off. I'll throw it out there to you.
Yeah, the problem I have with media is it always ends up being the same thing again. And to reiterate, it's a lot of people or what they're thinking. Not a lot of conversation. Personally have backed off from social media. The only account that I really have right now is on Facebook, and that's only my workplace, a private, and that's the easiest for us to communicate with each other. As well, having a meeting like this, I'll sit here and have a discussion when your schedules don't align, has been for me with some of the other group meetups here. It's really hard to catch up with people.
Oh, sorry, Brennan, you've gone away. Well, while he's coming back, I think essentially what I've heard so far, I know it's been a little bit cracky, but is that I did hear that it tends to be the same sort of thing in terms of people coming, with that there's no real change of opinion. It tends to become,
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back now. Yeah, go on.
Oh, perfect. Sorry. For a person who grew up with all this technology as it was evolving, I'm really bad with it. But it's just a matter of that talking over each other, unless you find that group that is willing to talk with each other. And that's one of the joys I have with social media, with some of more of the chat-based ones, because you can have those conversations in semi-real time. You can make those posts and keep up with each other without the barrage of things that you get like from the Facebook, the news feed. That's all. Well, sometimes there's a funny meme on there. It's just a barrage of almost uselessness, at least in my case, which is why I backed off from most of those. So it's a weird trying to find my purpose in the social media where it's obviously not designed for my purpose. It's designed for their purpose and what they want to get out of it, which is obviously however they get their revenue. So it's an interesting problem trying to make my purpose work within their framework.
Yeah. Kai, you want to jump in?
Oh, I think Brennan hit really well, and Tom as well. I love again with the metaphors of attract, right? Because the garden attracts bees, right? It doesn't promote itself in that sense. So I think about social media, I've actually got a very, very, very good relationship with social media, right? Because I was very conscious from the beginning, and I think it was more luck than anything to use it in a way that was to build relationships with people. So someone just flew from the US to visit me in the UK, and we met on social media, on Twitter. We wrote a piece on free speech and stoicism together, and then we met up. I also find it really powerful if, say, for example, Thomas, Scott, Brennan, Sharon, yourself, and I were to write, a message to somebody we wanted to be on the podcast element. So not this part necessarily of the Walled Garden, but another element. Because when you get like 15, 20 people, say, come on the show, that really does move mountains. Yeah. So if you grow the garden in a way that, like we're doing here, like I said, the one thing I love about this particular episode of the podcast is that it's an open mic. And as long as you're a member and you understand that you're growing the garden, and Thomas was saying that's very powerful. That's Thomas taking ownership of his patch, basically, because everybody's got their patch in the garden. If we have that understanding, when we go on social media, even if it's once a week, you say, on Monday, 4:00 Pacific time, we are going to tweet or such and such a person because we really want them on the show for this purpose. I think social media has been very, very powerful, and I've seen really, really interesting things. But I think it's like, and I learned this actually from a Christian preacher, and he said, make your rules before you go to do something new. Like, if you're going to go to university, before you step out of mum and dad's house, decide what your values are, at least what you think they are, and say, this is a line I'm not going to cross. Yeah. And I took that advice because I like to take advice from all walks of life, religious, not religious, British, non-British, anybody. Even children can teach a lot. I mean, Sharon, you've got 6 of them, so many, many grandchildren. They teach you more than you'd ever think when you reflect on it. So I think as long as we have said these are our ground rules, and this is the line that if we cross, we will acknowledge that fact. So someone might say, Kai, when I said about attraction and I said that we weren't going to do promotion, and that I understood was the mission, I saw one of your tweets. Obviously, this might be a private conversation Tom and I have. So one of your tweets, and it felt kind of a bit more like promotion. And I might say, Tom, why is that? And we can use a Socratic dialectic to decide, how are we going to use it, and how what is that line? And I think that's the key. That's the line I drew when I set up an account on Twitter, because that's what I mainly use to communicate with. Because you've got a door, you can knock on a door that you wouldn't be able to knock on otherwise. What were my ground rules, and why were they there? And under what circumstances could they change or be broken? So it's not a solid set of rules, but I'd have to have a reasonable solution to a problem if I need to change them. Okay, what does that mean? And I think the Stoics, after all, were statesmen. And I say men because there weren't women in the Senate at the time. So they also, if you think about it, it's no different. They would stand up and, try and make a scene if they were more like Cicero, right? Eclectic. So although they don't have the exact technology, they have the same mechanism. They can decide if they want to be a Cato, or they want to be a Cicero, or they want to be a Thrasea. So when Nero's like, praise me for murdering Agrippina, my mother, praise me, they all start singing, basically, his praises, because he's singing and look at me. And Thrasea is like, no. Right? He might not have got up and jumped up and down, but it was noticed that he wasn't going to praise Nero. He made a point of going, no. And that is a point in social media where you might see a pylon and you say, actually, guys, no, right? You might say, somebody might be from our walled garden, might have a go at an Epicurean, for example, you're saying, look, that's not where we're at, right?
I really hope that we have a turf war in our garden between Epicureans and Stoics.
You're going to say, you stole our name, guys.
I'd be out. What is happening here? What is happening?
They're going to say, there is actually, I've been having a discussion about the name of the walled garden actually on social media. And it's controversial because Epicureans are like, wait a minute. This is out. So it's already happened. I just haven't told you.
That's great.
That's already like, wait a minute, are they purely Stoic? So we're already having that. But it is a case
what I love most about that is the thing that really gets my goat is when people try to make an argument about whether or not something is good and their basis for that argument is whether or not it is Stoic. That gets that I can't handle it.
Well, it wasn't. It was more like the name, because obviously Epicureans had their gardens and Stoics are public. But the difference, I would say, and I haven't. Maybe I should say it.
But there's a deeper symbolic thread to it.
But also, it's a public garden. An Epicurean garden was private. It was enclosed. People weren't invited in the same way. So the Stoics publicly participated. They stood up, they stood up when they needed to stand up, and they were, Stoicism is highly political. It's just not politically charged. It's logocentric, but it's highly political. So Epicureans in their garden aren't trying to reach out and bring people in. What they're trying to do in the ancient world is like, okay, I'm quiet. It's not that they want an absence of pain, because they're really, they're realistic. They want an absence of unnecessary pain. Think about having a garden in the ancient world, and even in urban cities like Australia. If you have a garden in Melbourne, you have wealth, right? So again, that's a status symbol. In our case, what we're saying is, this is our garden. It is not the Epicurean garden. Just because Epicureans has a garden doesn't mean they have a monopoly on the term. But this is where it's different. And I've never thought of the walled garden particularly as a Stoic quote unquote garden. I think it's a garden where we want to grow, and as Sharon just said, point our arrows, different metaphor I know, but it is a very Stoic one, to which direction is virtue. I may not hit it, but I'm going to at least look at it. I'm going to look in the right direction. So I never saw the walled garden as solely Stoic, and I would dislike, I'd be quite unhappy, I suppose. I don't know if that's the right term, or uncomfortable perhaps is the right term, if people felt, because I'm not a Stoic, I don't belong in the walled garden. And I'd say the only reason you don't belong in the walled garden is if you don't believe that virtue is worth pursuing. Now, you might believe that it is the only good. You might believe it is the highest good. And you're Aristotelian. That's fine. If you tell me no, it's pleasure, it's likes. I'll be like, this is the wrong garden for you. Right? I'm not going to chase you out of it, but here's the gate. I think that's key. So that argument, funnily enough, on social media is already happening.
Yeah.
But it is happening with people having discussion about our name, but they haven't actually been here. So you take it with a pinch of salt. I don't know, Tom, if you feel the same way about it. I mean, I don't know, what would you say to that if people say something about the name and they haven't been here? You've been here, so that's why I'm like sort of picking on you. So
I haven't really thought about it in that way so much, and it's an interesting point. I just looked at it. I think I really like the point that it isn't Stoic only, but it is built around the virtues of Stoicism, and it even extends beyond. Right? Because Stoicism was really founded 2,000 years ago. And I like that it's been brought up to date now. And that we're adding to that. I believe, Simon, you just had that in one of your podcasts, how you want to grow that. And that I find very appealing. So I don't think we need to put a bunch of boundaries up, but it's also not, from what you were saying, this closed garden. So definitely go along from what I understand right at this point.
Yeah, in full agreement here that it's we want this to be something that everybody feels as though as long as we hold some common values amongst us, we
Mhm.
can really make some progress here and see if we can rediscover some, like Sharon says, liberate some wisdom. But Kai, something that I think Brennan touched on, which I think is important, is using social media for our purposes, right? And kind of, even though it has inbuilt systems that are for its purposes, how do we use it? And I think that you've been really good at that, Kai, in terms of you've come in with your own way and you've just been like, well, I'm just going to do it like this, right? And I'm just going to figure out the inner workings of social media, and I'm going to try and make a positive impact and avoid the pitfalls. And I wonder what you guys think of this, just as an idea. What I like about what I'm drawn to in terms of the Walled Garden community group on Facebook is that it's almost like we're replicating what we're doing on the Walled Garden website, but within Facebook's Walled Garden. Facebook's a giant Walled Garden, but then we've got our own little territory in there where the groups are much more about communication, getting together. It's much more of a close-knit kind of opportunity for communication on Facebook. And we might even consider...
Simon, can I just...
Yeah.
I don't think Facebook is a walled garden. I think it's quite wild.
Oh, yeah. It's
I think,
okay,
so
you have a good point.
I think that there are flowers growing, right? But the fact that there's a proliferation of a lot of things, and as Brennan has succinctly, and I'm very glad you're on this conversation because you've crystallized it in a way that I haven't, is that there are flowers growing, but there are a lot of weeds growing. There's a lot of everything growing. And because the goal in that particular company is to, like, growth is good. In a garden, some growth is good and some growth is suffocating. Right? So with the social media, people might say to me, if the metric is how many followers do you have, are you successful? I would say, well, no, I don't have 25 million followers, for example. If you ask me how many people have had tea with, how many people have had really meaningful conversations with, phone calls, how many people, when I talk to them about their kids' Lego sale, something like that, even though we met on something that's got nothing to do with Lego, I'd say I think it's been very successful because I've really met those people and had dinner with them and found out about their lives and what they're trying to do. And that, to me, at least my reading of the Stoics, is that is part of building the cosmopolis and working towards flourishing. Whereas having 25 million followers or 4 billion downloads, whatever it might be these days, that to me isn't flourishing.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean doesn't mean that I am, I have a monopoly of what I think flourishing is. But we look at the fruits, right? That's where judging, again, very Christian, judge the garden or the wild place by the fruits it grows. And again, I'm not saying even the most beautiful flowers, the roses have thorns. So that's why I'm saying it's not just, it's not like, oh, it's got a thorn that's terrible. No, that rose serves a purpose. So I think what we're trying to do is kind of like tidy a small corner of this wild in Facebook and say, look, we have ground rules. Yes, we know the Stoics, in the sage republic, there are no rules, but that's because all the sages act reasonably. so they also are, it's unwise to have no safeguards whatsoever. It's unwise, and we have to balance as well, because it can't be like we believe that the masses will sort it out. Because yes, in the ideal Stoic world, then you have a reasonable amount of mass who are rational. The problem is if you have a mass that isn't, it quickly becomes something difficult to manage. So this is another key thing from the sort of Stoic reasoning is, what is the purpose for the, say, Facebook group or the Twitter feed from the point of view of the Walled Garden and its members? And that will change year on year. So I just wanted to just jump in just so that we...
No, I agree with you. And so we could say that Facebook is a wild jungle and we're trying to colonize a certain part of it. And this is our little walled garden within Facebook. And I was even considering, how could we... I'm going to throw a few ideas out there, right? How can we manage both the Walled Garden website community and the Facebook community in a way that enables better communication, also enables people to play a role in the community, right? And I was thinking perhaps it could be an option for our members who join the Walled Garden community if they would like to become an admin in the Facebook group and help us to nourish this Facebook group, then they have that option. We will gladly accept their offer to be an admin. There's also options within the Facebook group for mentorship. Like if somebody comes in, you can actually say, I want a mentor, I want to be helped through philosophy, stoicism, something like that. Seeing as we are getting to know people like Toma and Brennan and Scott and these wonderful people who are coming along to our meetups, we might put it out there to Walled Garden members that if they would like to become a mentor within the Facebook group and actually pair up with somebody who wants to know more about philosophy, and perhaps they're not quite ready to join the community, but perhaps it would be helpful for them to have a mentor. That might be something as well that we could throw out there. And even within the Facebook group, I know we've been talking about going on Discord, and Brennan has been, really kind enough to say that he'd be happy to, administrate the Discord chats and stuff like that, and to help us out with that sort of stuff. I wonder if it would be even easier just to, within the Facebook group, the Walled Garden community, to have a breakout group for Walled Garden members, right? So this, so that we can communicate in there and, have all the same benefits that Facebook offers of, posting actual stuff and not just text. I wonder if that would be a better way to do it, rather than having different places, kind of saying, well, this Facebook group is kind of a thing, and we might as well nourish it. And we can have our own little breakout groups if we want to, that include, just the Walled Garden members as well, so that we can have those conversations. Does that kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts? Yeah, Toma.
Could also have some kind of a newcomers orientation group that's mentored, where people are exposed to some of the guidelines.
Nice. Yeah.
I really liked how you were considerate. You're not going to kick somebody off the group. You want the free speech, but there need to be some guidelines to keep the sanctity, because some people are just looking for, a problem potentially.
Yeah. And
so it's kind of like, somebody at the gate,
to everybody.
Well, but yeah, even for orientation's sake, just for learning. And you're doing a book, right? If I understand right, The Poet and the Sage.
That's right.
So some kind of an information package off the beginning, even, or an area to go to on a website.
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be a wonderful way to get introduced to Stoicism. I remember, like, my first podcasts, that was just so intriguing, but I wanted more now.
Yeah.
And I didn't know where to go, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good idea, is just having some way of, and this is all, like, I can set the group up in such a way that, people are very clear from the start, even with the questions that you ask when they first join. And so I think the two questions that I've asked that I think is going to be most helpful for us getting to know people is, what are you looking forward to in your life right now? As in, how can we encourage you, and then also what are you struggling with? Is there anything that, we can help you with? And so hopefully through those questions, we'll get to know people more. But also, I'm going to say, I will take on that feedback that you've given me, Toma, of setting it up in such a way that people have a clear idea from the start exactly what it's all about and how they can get involved in a really positive, meaningful way. So, hey, listen, I don't want to take up, a lot more of all of your time, but if there's anything else that you think we haven't considered today, I will go away and, obviously put all this together and we'll start getting things happening. But if there's anything else we haven't considered here, throw it out there. I'm open to any and all feedback.
So I got one quick thing. I heard that TikTok is a really great way to attract an audience, because it's so short and so sweet. And it's not really meant to be a promotional tool. I'm not sure about ads and stuff. I don't know the mechanics of it, but it may just be something we want to consider. And I heard the engagement is really good on it right now, and that's an ideal time to get set up on it, where the others are more saturated.
Yeah.
So just another consideration from what I've learned recently.
Yeah. And I think certainly it is that platform that is just like booming at the moment. Like I only see the negative into like I watch this hilarious guy on YouTube. His name's what's his name? Joey B or something like that. He basically, all he does on YouTube is he will take clips from like the most narcissistic, horrifying, TikTokers, and he'll just comment on it, like being like, what is happening in our society today? Please, somebody look at this, and so I've got a real, like, there's a thing in the bottom of my heart just like pulling me away from TikTok, because but I know what you're saying. And I think it's something we have to look at, if the mission is to transform people's lives, perhaps it'd be good if we could transform more than less, and we can use it in a healthy way. So yeah.
So without getting into too much detail on this, okay, but the way that the platform works, the algorithm is very unique. It depends on what you're searching for, you'll find. And I won't even go into the analogies that were used, but if somebody's looking to enhance their lives or are on a journey for wellness, then that would be an ideal mechanism, because that's where they would get aimed to, is potentially the walled garden then.
Yeah.
So in that way, it would be a real of service, right? Would be the leading advantage there. And it might cut out all the rest of the stuff out of the way, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, certainly. Well, this is all stuff that we'll have to, Kai, you want to jump in? Sorry. Oh, we can't hear you.
Audio.
Sorry. Scott's just said about introductory episodes. So I think if we were going to use something like TikTok, I think you take 10 seconds of what we've already recorded. Like, you've got so much material, even you personally, Simon, to draw on.
Yeah.
That I don't think in the beginning we need to create more.
Yeah.
If anything, like, there are episodes, even the Practical Stoic episodes, we must have 10-second snippets that would make sense to somebody. Like, I gave the example of Twitter. Like, if we say that if it's out of our control, don't give a crap about it. But people are not in your control. Does that mean you shouldn't give a crap about your kids because they're not in your control, right? So even if you've probably got snippets from your favorite guests, right, or favorite episodes of guests. I think like Joseph Syracuse would be a very good example. Asking, like, can I put 10 seconds of this particular line of, for example, that's not Stoicism, for example, and then having the one line about why it's not, and then the one line about what it would be Stoic, for example. I think if you went through the archived material, you could do two things. You can bring attention to your past material, which I know you distance yourself from in some respects, but I think it's like distance yourself in terms of where you want to go, but use that material so that you don't then have to create a new video, because creating a new video, for example, would take up more time, effort, and thinking space. Whereas going through, I particularly like episode 120 of Practical Stoic, and there's just one line that would just nail it. Right? And you are an artist, so you're going to know better than I am about sound bites or Sharon's one-liners. We could have a TikTok devoted to Sharon's one-liners. Right? So it's just a case of looking at what we have and not dedicating too much time, at least in the beginning, to creating new material. I don't think new material needs to be particularly creative. I think out of the hundreds of episodes, and even some of the episodes that we've done as the Walled Garden, they would serve. And I think Tom was right in terms of the seconds. Now, of course, if we suddenly get a lot of engagement, then we can reassess. Again, that's what Stoicism is, epistemologically speaking. There's no past and there's no future. It's right now, what is the appropriate thing? So, let's say we put Joseph Syracuse's 20 seconds things, or 10 seconds.
I'm sorry, you cannot condense Joseph Syracuse into 20 seconds.
Okay. He must have a sentence, though.
He talks for 3 hours nonstop about nuclear weapon history. Like, it's like, but go on. I see what your point is.
He's got intriguing stuff. That's why I said Sharon's one-liners would work really well, right? Or even two liners. We've just got a couple of two liners. So I think that Tom is right. And then what we can do is, like, as you're just taking out snippets rather than creating new, seeing what the engagement's like. Are people engaging? If they're not, then that's not the channel where the Walled Garden is going to, we're going to throw a lot of seeds. It's not going to grow. because it's not fertile ground there.
Yeah.
We, you know, as Scott has said, you could put a couple of snippets on the Facebook page. Is it growing there? So that's what I would say. That I don't think at this stage we should invest in getting new people by creating new videos. I think we should just take what we've got and then focus on people like Brennan, like Tomo, like Sarah, like Santara, and other people who have been here and going, right, you are the key, you know, you are key, you're here every week. How can we do things like, you know, sounds terrible, like social media, like let's go together and say that's the one guest we want to do, and everyone sends one tweet, which is 10 seconds. And the payoff is actually great because you've got 20, 30 people say, and then, you know, eventually 100 people going, why are you not, you know, on this podcast? And it's like everybody's delivered 10 seconds and you literally all pick the same day and the same time. It works really, really well. I've seen it. I've been involved in it. So I agree with Tomo, but I don't think that we need to do new material. I just think we need to see what else we've got. And you've got some excellent one-liners, or a couple of lines from your poetry. I think, I don't know, Tom, does that make sense? If I captured
absolutely does. I'm not sure if we can use the music on there or not, whether you have to have, but Simon, you make the music as well for the Practical Stoic podcast, that theme. I thought that was brilliant. I was thinking of that today while I was driving the car. That engaged me because it painted kind of a picture. And now that I think about it, of a garden. So if we could use that in the background, and then, you know, like you said, Kai, I think that's brilliant. You know, don't have to recreate it. You've got lots of content. Simon, you said that too. And Sharon, your insights, awesome. All blended together. That would be very attractive.
Well, then
I think what I like about,
sorry, go on.
I think what I like about all these ideas is that it's simple, because there are some people who, when they start talking about Stoicism, want to debate the differences in translations of the different pieces. Whereas if you get hit, it's like a face full of hot air when people start doing that for someone who's new to the idea or just wants to explore a little bit. Whereas all these ideas seem to be keeping very succinct, simple, yet still are conveying the message that you want, which allows someone who's newer, or even someone who's only been really studying it for the past couple of years, like myself, a chance to understand and feel like they can be a part of the conversation without getting so deep into it where they're debating if one translator picked the right word versus another translator, where you get to that point, and that can be a very strong turnoff to someone who's just trying to get their feet wet. So it sounds like such a great idea. The only other thing I would say about the social media is when you decide which social media or which platform to have that conversation, just have the conversation on that one platform. So the more platforms you have, the more spread out everyone is, and it gets to a point where you have 10 people all speaking on different platforms and nobody's listening to them because you've got 10 platforms. Have the one platform, because I feel like once a platform is decided on, we'll all migrate to it and we'll work with it until a better platform is found. But just to have that one platform, we can all have that discussion. Just like we've mentioned before, you know, even in the jungle of Facebook, like someone mentioned, you know, you can create that little area that we're all willing to stick in for a little while until a better place is found.
Well, that's okay. This is a really important point, because one thing that I worry about is, like, I've done it before where I've said, I'm going to be everywhere. Right. And then I don't have the brain power. I don't have the energy. Like, as soon as I have to get on social media and do things, my energy levels drop to, you know, below necessary. and so for me, what I like about this idea, and this is one thing that we might try, is seeing as the Walled Garden community on Facebook is there and people are there, people are interested in communicating with us if we will actually put in the time and effort. Let's nourish this place first, at least for a few weeks, and let's see if we can do this really well. I'm also going to jump back on Twitter. The reason why I'm jumping back on Twitter is because I love politics, and I think that that's where politics is being discussed at the moment. And I think personally, I'm interested in those kinds of discussions. And also, Kai, you know, you're on there. It's a place for, intellectuals, academics. It's kind of the place where I feel like I want to be if I want to be anywhere. So personally, I'm going to be on there. But let's start with the Walled Garden Facebook community. And then if that goes really well and we manage to nourish that into something beautiful, a few weeks later, we might say, okay, now we have the energy, the brain power to actually go over here onto this other one. Let's maybe put some stuff over here to diversify a bit. Does that sound like a kind of pretty reasonable way to go about it?
It'd be the other way around, Simon.
Yes.
So if it works really well in Facebook, you'd keep it. If it
no, of course we'd keep it. Yeah, I'm talking about.
If it works really well, you don't need to go on the other thing. I still think Tom is right, though. I still think a couple of seconds video would be helpful. I still agree with Tom. And then if it doesn't get, I mean, we've had this conversation a couple of months ago. Like, let's water it and nourish it. If it doesn't get the results that we want, and it doesn't get the results that are conducive to, meaning what we want by being conducive to community, right? Not what I personally want, what you personally want, but what we think is good based on the conversations that we had, which is the way the Stoics come together. Go, what is good? We all decide. So, okay, that's not working. Let's try it, for the sake of argument, TikTok. Twitter for me is a way to get guests, right? You cannot get guests on Facebook. But that's because then you're saying, then that's why I said with the clarity, like we use Twitter to, with Thomas, Brennan, Scott, Sharon, me, you, we all use Twitter when we want a particular guest. Other than that, the conversations are either in the garden or in the Facebook private group of the garden, either way, right? Probably better in the private Facebook group because then you haven't got to build it. It isn't weighing on your server, right? Just a practical thing. So you say, okay, this is Twitter. We do it every Monday. We go on there, for example, we try to get this one guest. The rest of the time, we're in the private garden of Facebook because it's a private space. Because for me, people come in and they'll invest because it's a private space. Because it does have to be private on some level. It's not absolutely enclosed. You can't see what's going on, and you have to know like the special knock and the secret password and stuff like that. But it has to be a space that you feel that if you're part of it and you have a patch. Twitter, you can't. There's no patch.
There's
no patch. It's not possible. But that's like basically that could be our communication out to the academic world because that's where they are to get certain guests, not all guests, some. Facebook is how we build, your community because you don't do that on Twitter. That's how I think it works. I think Discord may in the future be important because if you do have breakout groups, if you suddenly have loads of people on Facebook like I really love the Stoic God, and you're like, right, okay, this is not really for the conversation on Facebook because that's not really what this group's about. But let's do a Discord, particularly on Stoic theology, right? And everyone like runs on there and has a chat about Stoic theology. And that will run for a time. You say after 6 months, I think we've had that conversation. Let's close that Discord chat down and open another one about, Stoicism and sport. And so then you have like, a 2-month argument about Stoicism and sport, like a discussion, perhaps some arguments. I think that's what Discord does really well. But that's not something that's organically grows. It's more like for me, the way I've used Discord is that I have a specific purpose for a specific amount of time. And Discord for me, I don't know, Brendan, you could comment. It has a date. It has a best before date, and you kind of feel like, this is run its course. And then you say we're having a chat on this course about Discord, and it has to have a sufficient number of people. So this is something in the future from my point of view. Next month we're having a chat on relationships, marriage, and Stoicism, and it runs its course. Whereas Facebook is like the bit that you come into. And you build the family film. I don't know, does that make sense, Brennan? If you're into your Discord.
I mean, I've definitely seen. So I'm part of a few different Discord channels. Some of them definitely have that end date with their conversations. However, some of the other ones I'm in are long term. It almost has a lot of similarities to the way that some Facebook groups run, where it's kind of like an ongoing conversation. The one joy that I've had with my Discord groups is that they allow you to have those multiple streams of conversation going on at the same time. So, if some people want to talk about, I don't know, want to have an in-depth conversation about meditations, you could make that one channel where people can pop in and have that conversation about meditations without ruining the flow of the big conversation that's going on in the main chat. So I've always liked Discord because you can pop in and out of Discord, catch up on the conversation, add your 2 cents when you feel like it. The channels, the groups themselves can kind of ebb and flow as you have conversations pop in and out. Downside, I see the Discord as opposed to something like Facebook, where Facebook has that reach. It has the roots. There's very few people you're going to come across that are online that don't have a Facebook. And that's a very easy way to drag's the wrong word, to have people come in and join our own little group. Whereas if you get someone who doesn't already have Discord, it could be a downside. It could be a turnoff to somebody to be like, oh, well, I have to download another social media app now in order to engage this conversation. Let me just look somewhere else. So while I'm a huge proponent of Discord, I also recognize that there's downsides. And I don't necessarily see it. You have to have one or the other. The idea of just trying to nurture the Facebook group sounds like a fantastic idea. Easy step into the world without having to start downloading new things and learning new platforms. It allows someone a chance to get their feet wet without having to get too crazy with things.
Yeah, that's what I'm after, is dipping our feet in the ocean of social media and seeing if we can actually make something that's beautiful. And then if we can, and if we feel like replicating that elsewhere, excellent, So I think this is a good strategy for now. And I'll even take a look at, I know that there would be like Facebook apps where we can integrate, Discord with Facebook. If that's something that we might be able to do, then we could potentially get the best of both worlds. And there's a lot of like ability to customize the group. So I'm going to try and make this, and I want everybody's feedback here as well. So if there's anything that you think after this session, if you jump on Facebook, go now and, go to, it's the Walled Garden community. If you just look that up, just tell me what you'd like to see in there, and I'll see if I can make it happen. And we can together grow this into something that, gives people a window into the Walled Garden. And then, as I said earlier, like what I always hope is that, this is something that this is a commercial venture. We want people to join up with us because it would be good if we could do more of this. Like we hope that what we're offering is something that is valuable enough that people consider it as something that they would gladly, pay a little bit for and contribute to what we're doing to spread it more out into the world. So we do hope that people will go from the group on Facebook to the Walled Garden website and join these conversations and get, one-on-one with us and like, let's get face to face. But nonetheless, this will be a good place just to really communicate with people as effectively as possible on social media, and have those conversations there and build a community. So are we all happy? I feel like we've come to kind of a really good kind of, unanimous kind of conclusion here that this might be a really good way to go. Was there anything else we missed?
Good.
Well, listen, Sharon, if Sharon is happy with this, like she's completely, like I don't see you on social media, Sharon, and you've told me that you're just like, you're happy being away from it. But if you're happy with this, I think that's good enough for me. But yeah.
Hey. Yeah, I think
Sorry, Kai.
Certainly for now, yeah. As I think as it grows, we would have to have a private Facebook group, because you do feel like, yeah, okay, you can't give everything for free, and you can't have, well, if you really want, for example, like, I'm going to do next year the Agony Uncle kind of thing. I don't want to give too much of that away on the open Facebook space, because
I don't think you need to give any of that away on the open Facebook group.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I think like the Walled Garden website is where I'm going to be posting, and I'm getting closer and closer every day to this happening, but all of my poetry, all of my music, all of the stuff that I'm creating, even if it's something that I'm like, I'm not really sure about this, I want it to be on there, because that's the privilege that you get of being in the walled garden. You get to see everything that I'm doing, even if it's not released to the public yet. So you get that dive into my soul, but we will slowly be releasing this stuff, because what I hope is that this isn't all that I create, and there's going to be more than enough to share around, right? So I want to put it out there, and I'm going to be doing that, like putting it on social media. But there's always going to be more in the walled garden. There's always going to be more communication, like this. There's always going to be more amazing content. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of, you will see what we're doing in the walled garden on Facebook, but you won't see everything. And that's how it should be, because what we're creating in the walled garden is very special, and it's beautiful, and it's a great place to be. So yeah,
Happy.
Cool. If Kai's happy,
great.
if Sharon's happy, if you guys are happy as well, I think this is great. I'm excited. All right. Well, this is beautiful. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming along. I feel so much better after this conversation, because it's just been weighing on me. What do I do about social media? But now that we've all had a chance, and this is what we're going to be doing moving forward, is coming together and sharing all of our wisdom and saying, great, this is how we move forward. So thank you for helping me with this. And next week, we're going to be doing, there might be changes, but at this stage, what we're doing is a meetup based around, I'm actually going to be having a specific conversation with Sharon. And the reason I want to do that is because she's been with me along the whole journey of writing and publishing The Poet and the Sage. And, she's read it. And she understands the book, and she understands probably more than I understand about the book, really. So we're going to be having a conversation, and we want to include all of you as well. So come along. That's going to be a little meetup for the Poet and the Sage. But thank you, everybody. Much love and care to all of you, and we'll see you next time. Hey everybody, so you heard it here first. We are revamping what was once the Practical Stoic Mastermind on Facebook, and turning that into what is now the Walled Garden Community. So head over there, search for that in Facebook. We would love to see you there. We'd love to engage with you, talking philosophy, theology, morality, virtue, wisdom, all of these wonderful things that we are really wrestling with in the Walled Garden. And also, don't forget that we'd love to see you this Friday, USA time, at this meetup that we're putting together as the official release, I guess, of the Poet and the Sage, my conversation with Sharon LaBelle. I'd love to see you all there, and I'd love to discuss the book with all of you, and then to also show you some of the first chapters. So we'll see you there, and we'll see you in the Walled Garden, and we'll see you in the Walled Garden community on Facebook. And thank you so much for listening in. You've been listening to the Walled Garden podcast. For more episodes just like these, or to join our community, go to thewalledgarden.com. See you there.